So recently on the Dawn Forged cast, the issue he was talking about specifically was the issue of healing hit points versus, what are the other ramifications of combat damage in a fantasy role-playing game, broken bones, severed limbs, that sort of thing. And so he dug into the question about the mechanics of it. How do you define a broken bone, say, in D&D, and therefore how do you define, how does magic work when it interacts with these things? It's a really interesting topic, and I'm not going to get too directly into the healing subject, but it prompted some ideas of mine that I just wanted to share a little bit about my view and my opinions about the bubble theory or the bubble mentality, which says that hit points are kind of they exist outside of the character, and so as is the classic example in Dungeons and Dragons. And the way Gary Gygax had envisioned them and where the term hit points came from was, hit points meant the point at which you are hit. And so the idea of the bubble mentality is that your character is never, really truly injured. He's never really truly hurt until those hit points, until the hit that knocks your hit points to zero. All the other attacks leading up to it are fatigue or exertion or, these other, maybe like minor bumps and bruises and that sort of thing, but that, the sword never, gashes your flesh. It never rakes your flesh until you hit 0 hit points, and then you take that nasty wound. And I'm not going to go too far into it. Suffice it to say, I have problems with this mentality. A good portion of it stems from simple preference. It's just a stylistic preference that I like. That I like combat to be more visceral. I don't like this idea of kind of just this narrative padding that your character has that has to be kind of worked through in order to actually threaten somebody in a physical sense.
It's done.
Threaten their mortality. But there's more to it than that, honestly. I think there's a lot of mechanical things going on there. Combat in RPGs should be less like this.
Have you quite finished?
And more like this. Your players should be envisioning the game happening less in a fashion like this. And more in a fashion like this. Okay, yeah, I'm being a little facetious, I know. I'm using some extreme examples, but honestly there is value to that, and I believe that combat, that physical confrontations in role-playing games should be threatening. The player characters, and through the characters, the players themselves should be afraid of the consequences of drawing their weapons. And there was a good example, I believe, in Dawn Forged video of having somebody pointing a crossbow to the back of your neck, and the player turning to the DM and saying, well, I've got 97 hit points, and even if the guy gets lucky and he gets a critical on me, it's only going to do, 20 hit points of damage to me, so whatever, I'm just going to, I'm not worried about that. Now, yes, you're going to say that this is a problem with the player's perspective, and I do agree. However, I believe that the player should get the understanding and appreciation from a game that if all things equal, that role-playing grounds equal, that the game mechanics being treated fairly between the player and the game master. When people draw weapons down upon your player characters, they should genuinely be concerned for their lives. In the opposite sense of the word, if the player characters are considering violence to solve a problem, the game should enforce the mentality that they need to strategize, they need to plan, they need to carefully consider that option, that violence should not be the most likely course of success, likely to leave with minimum to zero consequences, that they should be concerned when weapons are drawn that somebody might get hurt and that somebody might die. For these reasons, I don't really care for a general abundance of healing magic, because it kind of takes a bit of the wind out of the sails of mortality, that it says you don't have to be afraid of a sword wound, because, well, the cleric, he'll just come over and he'll say a few words and you're all better. But more specifically, I really, really despise resurrection-type spells that return formerly dead characters to life. Now, necromantic spells that create, zombies and skeletons and mummies and that sort of thing, absolutely beautiful. Love that stuff to death. But I'm talking specifically here about the raise dead and the resurrection and true resurrection spells, where it's basically like hitting the reset button on the character. It's oops, you died. Okay, well, let me go buy a gem, and then I'll pop you back to life, and let's carry on with our day. Anyway, again, this is a stylistic preference. All of these are opinions. You are entitled to listen to them or not listen to them, as you will. But it's just going to say that I like visceral combat. I like combat to be present in role-playing games, because action and conflict is exciting, and combat is a very immediate, very satisfying form of conflict within a role-playing game. But at the same time, if you're going to try to create tension, if you want your combats to actually have tension to them, there has to be some risk of consequence. There has to be a risk to failure, and that risk needs to be significant enough that it does not shatter the suspension of disbelief. That's my primary problem with bubble mentality hit points, is that it breaks the suspension of disbelief when you have a scenario that comes up, and it may only be the odd scenario that comes up, where things don't seem to be behaving the way that they should. Somebody takes a crossbow bolt to the back of the neck, and they haven't even lost a quarter of their hit points, so they can freely, immediately turn around and distribute justice upon whoever it was that did that. And yeah, it's kind of a break for me. So, thanks for listening.